Well, Roy, welcome to the podcast. Really happy to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite and and thanks for sitting down having this conversation with me today.
Yeah, it's been great knowing you, and I know that really the purpose of this podcast is really going to be talking about your book that you came out with, "The Art of Leading," and wanted to take a deep dive in that and talk more about leadership and learn more about you and the work that you do.
Yeah, appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. Let's get into
Yeah,
it.
so let's start off by kind of the why behind this book and the art of leading. What really inspired you to write this book, and how did it come to fruition?
Yeah, so the interesting thing is the book came from, so I've been like an executive and like a coach and a leader for years, right? Probably for the last 18 or 19 years. And I was encouraged by my mentees to start a podcast, which I started a podcast, started sharing information, different life tips. And then I went from a podcast and they were like, oh, you should do YouTube videos as well. And a friend of mine is a very popular YouTuber named Ruslan. And so he was like, yeah, you should get into, you should make your podcast video because I had an audio podcast. So I started doing that. And then basically I was taking the principles that I was using to mentor people and just putting them online, right? Because in that way, because at one point I had 57 mentees and it's really hard to like directly communicate. And so I literally created a podcast and a YouTube channel to talk to all of my mentees at one time because I'm an executive and a consultant and a father and a pastor. Like I have a lot of stuff to do. But what that led to was, okay, getting into a lot of discussions just around leadership as a father, leadership as an artist, leadership as a business owner, entrepreneur, executive, whatever it was. And so what I wound up doing is I put on YouTube and I kind of did a master class like these are the 13 things, right? I try to distill everything that I teach my employees, my mentees. Like if I had to package leadership, here are the 13 things that I would tell you you need to be focused on. Um, so I put that out there. Mentees loved it. And then, of course, you can give people things and it's never enough. And they were like, you know what would be even better than the videos is a book. And so, was prayerful about it, kind of thought and was like, you know what? I have a large audience and following on LinkedIn, right? And a lot of executives that I know, I speak at technology and leadership and executive events like 3, 4, 5 times a year. So I'm like, you know what? It would be good to kind of distill this down. So the book actually came from the 13 principles that I placed in the video. And then, I kind of wrote the first draft, put it out there. I let some executives and some other people that I know read it. And they were like, you know what? We want more practical stuff as well. They were like, we love the content, but we love stories, right? Like, can you give us a story of how you applied each principle in real life? And so the book wound up being basically the 13 principles, those principles being applied, but then also like questions for reflection. And, like if I was sitting down with somebody explaining these principles, these are the things I would want you to ask yourself, right? So it's almost like counseling people through those principles because it's a transformative way of looking at leadership. And it's not a typical way that a lot of times we talk about leadership, like in the framework that I built it. So that's kind of how it came about. But it was literally podcasts, YouTube videos, and then a book, which is also now like consulting and leadership workshops and online leadership course and all of that stuff as well.
Yeah, so what really sparked you to do work in like the space of leadership?
I don't think I ever had a spark. It's one of those things that like I'm a firm believer. I don't think you can actually teach people to lead. I think you can teach people to manage, right? Like I have an MBA, I have an undergrad in business, right? Like I think you can teach people how to manage. But I actually think everyone is a leader, which is weird because people say you can't teach leadership. I don't think you can teach leadership.
Yeah.
I think we all have an innate ability to influence. It's just
Mhm.
the measure with which how we use it. So that was one thing. Like there were a lot of people who were in management roles, executive roles, pastoral roles, right? Like wherever they were, like they just didn't feel well equipped, right, to be leaders or to use their influence or to lead other people. And so read a lot, right? Especially I've traveled 75% of the time for over 10 years and I would read on planes. So I would read 60, 70 books a year just flying.
Wow.
So And I read a lot of books on leadership, but I found myself anytime I had a mentee or somebody that I was coaching or a colleague, I had to give them like a list of 25 books. And I'd have to say, like, take this part from this book, take this part from that book. Like this part is good, but right. So there wasn't, I didn't find anything that was like a complete work that truly reflected the way that I saw leadership. And that's, I think, because a lot of my mentees read all the books that I recommended, right? And they were like, it's still not putting it all together. Like, we want to hear like the principles from you. So I think it was trying to distill that information and then adding the practical application that can apply across multiple industries, different job types, whatever the case may be, that kind of inspired me to do it. Cause like, if there was a book that was written that I could hand somebody and say, like, this is kind of what I believe as a leader, other than me handing somebody the Bible. All right. Like, other than that, like, and I couldn't find one. Right. So, at the end of the day, so my decision was just to write one. But that was the inspiration of trying to fill that gap of not having to give somebody a list of 25 to 27 books for them to read and then to tell them to pay attention to one chapter here, one chapter there as well.
Mm, that's really good. I like what you said earlier is that everyone does have influence, but I think there's two things. They don't tap into their leadership or they're not necessarily equipped to lead, and I truly believe you can't teach anyone leadership. It comes with experience over time for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think that sets, I think you touched on it a little bit, but I want to go more into it, is what do you think that sets this leadership book apart from all the rest of the leadership books that are out there? Because there are a lot of more than enough leadership books out there.
They are, and the funny thing is, and like even depending on who I was mentoring, right? Like I had
Yeah.
leadership books that spoke really well to salespeople.
Hmm.
I had leadership books that speak well to pastors, right? About being emotionally healthy, right? Like, but there are leadership books that kind of addressed employees or sales growth or customer retention. I didn't find a lot of leadership books that fully reflected on who you were as a person, right? And like you just kind of said, like we don't use our influence because we don't understand who we are and like how powerful our influence is, right? So when you look at like a Dale Carnegie or the 48 Laws of Power, they were all also kind of positioned at like, this is how you do this to get what you want, right? Not necessarily like, this is the way you lead for the overall benefit of humanity. So a lot of leadership books were kind of leading to like a sales outcome or a business outcome, or to me, like a selfish outcome where like for me leadership is about is and we talk about in the book like for me the foundation of leadership is love, right? And it's a genuine care for all of humanity. So it's not just I don't want to just lead you so that you make me more money because you making me more money could lead to your divorce.
Hmm.
So would I rather you do the job that was best for your family in a way that gave you work life harmony that allows you to be successful, or am I going to squeeze every dollar out of you that I can or every hour out of you that I can to benefit my income? To me, that's bad leadership because if I help you be successful at work but you fail in your marriage, then I'm not a good leader,
Yeah.
right? But so most of the stuff that I read, it was very specific. It was, it was talking to me as an executive. It was talking to me as a pastor. It was talking to me as a father. It was talking to me as an artist. But I'm all of those things. So like I can read one book that'll give me all this advice on how to be an artist, but it's contradicting with the book that's telling me all the stuff I need to be an executive or an entrepreneur. So since I am all of those things simultaneously, right? I've been an executive and a consultant and an author and a performing artist and a director of a nonprofit and a pastor, literally all at the same time, not in different, not do this for a year, literally all at the same time, doing all of those things. I've been a leader in the military, right? So I think that was the thing that was unique is that tried to write a book that actually addresses every part of your life, not just, this is how, like, this book is how to be a great husband or a great wife, and this book is about being a great parent, because we're all of those things simultaneously. And we can't, even
Yeah.
though we try to, you can't really, you compartmentalize yourself and it makes you inauthentic and it makes you less effective. So you
Hmm.
got to figure out what you can do that actually bolsters like who you are made to be. And when you walk that way in every situation, to me, that's true leadership, right? I'm a servant leader everywhere that I go. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. Like that's just who I am. It does. I can be in a restaurant. If it's crowded, I will help them organize tables. Like it's just my nature. It's the way that I think. Um, and when I realized that like stepping into those things, it was powerful, right? And but it was also energizing. So I don't feel drained. Like, and everyone's like, how do you do so many things? Because I'm the same person all day. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. If I step into a different room, I can have and you and I were talking a little bit before, right? Like I can have an operational impact on a church and help them figure out their logistics the same way I can a food service company or a healthcare organization. So it's not a lot for me, but then I get value and I feel a sense of not pride, but I feel a sense of fulfillment in helping a church run better or helping a nonprofit run better. So that stuff winds up energizing me, which stops me from burning out because everything that I'm doing, I feel fulfilled in it because I'm doing it authentically as myself.
Yeah, and I think with your kind of perspectives, there's a lot of value there because you've led in different contexts, not just at different times, but all at the same time. So you bring a
Yeah,
lot of different perspectives from different spaces. And I like what you brought up about compartmentalizing because I think that's the worst thing that you can do as a leader or as just as a person, compartmentalizing your different areas of influence that you have. Um, it's like I've heard a pastor talk about this, like you're the same on stage as you're off stage.
yeah,
And I think that's so important, a very important trait for I think not just leaders, but everyone to have. Like who you are at work is who you are at home. And we have to change a few things, right? Professionalism and stuff like that. But it's
yeah.
like you want to show your true authentic self. You don't want to be a great performer at work or great person or great leader at work, but then be a terrible spouse at home. That just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah,
That just
and it
doesn't work.
creates that imbalance. I've used this example before. Especially in from a ministry and a church context. I said it's interesting that you have people who want to be in leadership at church, but nobody at work will trust you to
Yeah.
manage anybody.
Yeah.
So like people's salvation and their emotional security and their secrets and their privacy is very serious in the church. But like you work at a job where people don't trust you to lead, yet you want me to let you lead, but if you're a leader, shouldn't you be a leader at work as well?
Yeah.
Like, why are you like you're the baseball coach, but you don't take on any additional responsibility at work? Like, why? Like, why are you coaching and motivating people in the evening, but then at work, like you're an individual contributor that's like, oh, this is just my job and I don't want to be bothered, right? And so, but then you hate your job when if you were actually more of a coach at work, you would probably enjoy your job
Hmm.
and you wouldn't have all of these dividing lines. But and I'm sure I know we're going to talk about we probably talk about authenticity. So, but that's the main thing there. But the one thing I didn't realize this until a close friend of mine lived with me and my family for a couple of years. And he's a film producer and all of this other stuff. So I always have an office in my house. I set him up on the other side of my office, and he would just be there editing and doing, put his headphones on and he talked to me one day. We were eating lunch. He said the insane thing, Roy. He said, can't tell the difference between who you're talking to. He said, I can't tell if you're talking to somebody from your church, one of your mentees, or one of your employees until you mention like a technical term or maybe like a customer name. He said, because other than that, all of your conversations sound the same. He said,
Hmm.
all you're doing is encouraging people all day. You're giving them advice all day, like you're pouring into them all day. So he was like, I literally can't tell from the other side of the phone if you're having a work conversation, a ministry conversation, a consulting conversation, or a mentoring conversation. He was like, and I
Wow.
don't know, because I don't hear
Yeah.
myself, right? But when
Yeah.
he said that, I thought about it and I was like, and this is probably 5 years ago. And I'm like, man, you're right. Like I am, like people are calling me for the same reasons, right? And I'm helping them navigate problems. But anybody that I talk to, first of all, I care about you as a person. So how are you? Right. And then how are personal things impacting the way that you perform your job or whatever task you're responsible for? And then, like, how can I help you reach whatever goal or objective you're going for? Right. And,
Mm.
and then I was like, man, I'm doing that for customers, for me, like I do that for everybody. And it was interesting for me because once I realized that work started becoming less draining to me. So I'm like, I am doing the same thing all day and I love doing this. So like let me lean into that more. And that just helped my career progress grow in success and my reputation and everything in the industry as well, because I leaned into that. Like I really am good at helping people, developing people, and helping them recognize their leadership potential. So let me just do more of that, right? Like I don't need to be the technical expert. I don't need to be the engineering expert, even though I have a background in engineering. I'm actually
Yeah.
a lot better at leading people. So let me lean into that and then encourage and build up people who are good at the things and who are passionate about the things that I can do, but they don't necessarily wake me up, right? They don't excite me at the end of the day. So
Yeah. Sorry, lost my train of thought here.
no worries.
Oh yes. Yeah, so Roy, the three elements that you bring up in the book, which is in your subtitle, The Art of Leading, Truth, Love, and Empathy in Action. Why did you choose those three, truth, love, and action? And why do you think that or truth, love, and empathy in action? And why were those so important to you when talking about those three things in the context of leading and leadership?
Yeah, I think one, again, like when I thought about like what my leadership style was, right? People ask that question, like my leadership style is love. Like that is my actual leadership style, that I've kind of realized over the years. But the reason I had to add truth into it, because a lot of times when we think about love, it's we don't correlate it with honesty, right? Like we assume love is like me saying nice things and not making people upset or not making people uncomfortable. So I didn't want love to be like this infatuating, enabling term, which is why I coupled it with truth. Right? So you have to love people, but you also have to be honest. Like I love my kids, but telling them things that they don't want to hear or that they, right? Like they don't like
Yeah.
it. But if I love them, I should tell them the truth. But so in that kind of that's what kind of fed the truth part and like the chapters on vulnerability and transparency and honesty. But then from an empathy perspective, is that you can love somebody, but you also need to tell truth in an empathetic way,
Mm,
right? Because you can tell truth and be a jerk, right?
yeah.
Like one thing that like being honest, and just because you love people, it doesn't mean everything's going to be nice, but you also don't have to be abrasive and abusive and aggressive and just condescending and disrespectful, right? Which becomes very easy for people to do. So like that, like so in my mind, I'm like, even though love is the foundational thing, like it should drive us to truth, so we should want to be honest. We shouldn't be omitting details. We should be telling people what not just what we want them to hear, but what they need to know. But we also should be doing it from a place of empathy, where we're putting ourselves in their shoes. And if I was them, how would I want to hear this? If
Yeah.
I was them, how would I be taking this? And even as you're making decisions as a business owner, as a leader, right? Like how does that impact them? So when you put all of that together and you see it in practice, like to me, that's the art of leading, right? And the reason I call it the art of leading and not something else is because I think that both businesses and people are uniquely made and designed with a purpose,
Mm,
right? So that's why I call it art, because like handmade art, no matter how much you try to get it the same, they're all different, right? So there might be we might be 95% the same, but there's 5% that's different. So when you're leading people, the reason I lean towards, and I really love the title The Art of Leading, is because like I'm leading individual pieces of art. So like as much as I might want a cookie cutter and I might want to treat Cameron the way that I treat John, the way that I treat Dave, you actually can't, because they're different people.
hmm.
Like you can do that, but you're going to get a generic outcome if you apply generic leadership principles. You will get a unique outcome if you provide if you take a unique leadership approach. And I think when everybody is functioning like at maximum capacity in their unique ability, that's where you really get innovation and diversity and and the maximum outcome, right? When we're all being the best version of who we are and not being distilled down into some generic category that we try to apply these like cookie cutter leadership approaches to, which is why most of the book is about how you think as a leader, not these like 3 steps on how to, because I don't actually believe in any of that. Because for me to believe that generic principles work, to believe that people are generic. And I don't, because I believe that people are fearfully and wonderfully made. So like it may work, but if a generic principle works on somebody, it's because they don't know who they are, right?
Yeah.
Because if they were being themselves, they wouldn't be trying to follow some generic cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, and that's why I think that leadership, our own leadership and the way we lead is an art as well that continues to
Yeah,
evolve and evolves over time. But I like what you said is that leadership starts with like the way we think, and that's why I like the focus of this book because a lot of leadership it has to do with our perspectives, what's in our mind, what do we think of the people, what do we think of ourselves, do we even know ourselves? I think that's one of the challenges that I had early on is when I sat in the seat of leadership I did not know who I was. And
yeah,
so I led terribly.
yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good point, and that's why even the way that the book is structured, right? Like the majority, half of the book is about how you think as a leader, right? And then there's a section on the things that you do as a leader, and then how do you deal with transitions, and termination, and separation. But more than half of the book, like there's 13 chapters, seven of the chapters are about you in a way that you think. Because to your point, I think we tend to look outwards, but it's like no, if you understand yourself like if your employees can easily make you angry, then what's wrong with you?
Hmm.
Like I don't need to fix my employees because people shouldn't be able to push me off of a cliff, right? And like I do leadership consulting and I was at a company in Tampa, Florida, and I used an illustration. Like I used the edge of a table and I put something close to the edge. And I said, like, as the leader, you should never be this close to the edge,
Hmm.
right? Like it shouldn't be easy for somebody to push you off of the edge. So I was like, what I'm here to do is pull you back off the edge. Like, let's work through these principles because you have to carry the burden. You have to get pushed around. You have to be the person that's able to take, constructive criticism. And if you're close to the edge, what winds up happening is every time something happens, you're falling off a cliff, and people look at you like you're crazy. But I'm like, that's not the people around you, it is your fault that you were standing that close to the edge to begin with. Right. So,
Yeah.
like, how do you move yourself back? And a lot of that, like you said, comes from that introspection and
Hmm.
understanding that I need to understand myself and what I think and where my PTSD from former jobs and my work trauma is so that I don't actually live that out when I become a leader, right? Because you either become the you like when you become a leader, you either become the opposite of what you hated or you
Yeah.
try to mimic what you thought you liked when you didn't really understand either, right? So you wind up becoming some like Frankenstein version of bad managers and good managers when you still don't fully understand yourself or the people that you've been given the privilege to lead.
Yeah, I love that term that you mentioned, work trauma. That's a new term that I'll have to start using because we all
Yeah.
have some of it, especially in leadership. And I think that's why leadership is such an art, is that it evolves over time and we learn through the different experiences and trials and tribulations that come through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the next couple things that I wanted to talk about that you talk about in the book is vulnerability and authenticity. So what was the importance of vulnerability, you would say, in the book, and why was that important for you to bring up in this book, The Art of Leading?
Yeah, I think from even kind of just what we were talking about from a vulnerability perspective, I don't think that we explore why we feel the way that we feel and we don't communicate it out loud. So even if we do talk about it, it's just in our mind, right? So like if someone says something and it makes you angry, it's actually a point of vulnerability to say, you know what? You just said that and it upset me. And like, right. And like, let's talk about why. But we don't do that a lot. Like we're encouraged to kind of like just close it all in. But then what winds up happening is internally, you're responding to all of these things. You're never vulnerable and you communicate how things make you feel, your weaknesses or anything like that, right? Even if you've got, I mean, I know people that I found out after knowing them for 20 years that they were colorblind. Like, why did I never know you were colorblind?
Mhm.
Right? Because we're taught that anything about us that seems different or that's not normal is a deficiency. So I think vulnerability, for one, it just humanizes you as a leader and it lets people know like I'm not perfect, I'm not, I'm not Superman, like I am human. I do feel things, I do have bad days, you know, um I do get offended, I do have insecurities because when you're human, you give people the freedom to be human, right?
Hmm.
Like if I'm Superman, as much as that sounds cool, if I'm Superman, then everybody else is supposed to be bulletproof. And like, but that's just not true. But it's also not true for me. So it's like, right, when we project like a false sense of perfection or superiority, I think it puts people in a negative it puts people at a negative disadvantage, right? So that's my thing about vulnerability. Like we're human, and the more that we show our humanity, the more that other people we lead by example, right? Then other people
Yeah.
feel human as well. And then I think that falls into authenticity because I can be vulnerable about my weaknesses or my concerns or my fears, but I can still do that in a compartmentalized way, right? I can still only do it related to work problems. So I can tell you that I'm concerned about our quarterly results, but I'm not vulnerable when I'm going through a divorce
Mm.
because I'm not being authentic. I'm like, oh, this is the work version of Roy. You don't get to hear like the personal version of Roy. And I mean, and I learned that the hard way over time because I have after I got out the military or even in the military, I wound up with autoimmune diseases. So I have 4 chronic illnesses, and I hid them in my career for like 8 years. Like no one knew. And then I was at an executive retreat, and I drove myself to the emergency room, right? Because I was having a crisis, and everybody was freaked out and everybody was so concerned. So I just shared after that. I didn't have any option, right? Because I disappeared and everybody wanted to know where I was. But the response that I thought everybody was going to look at it as some deficiency or some weakness, when I was authentic in that way about something very private, it actually made people respect me more because they were like, we already respected you, but now we know that you've actually been outperforming everybody while having a chronic illness. They were like, how is that possible? How do you do all of this stuff? And you still do community service and you do all of this outreach. And so people were convicted that was like, man, I'm perfectly healthy and I'm not out here doing stuff. And like you, and so even the fear that I had of sharing that part of myself, right? Where I was vulnerable around work and around my opinion and all of that other stuff, but I wasn't being authentic about my personal struggles, my health struggles, um, and some of my opinions on that side as well. So I think vulnerability goes hand in hand with authenticity. But and like we were saying before, I think authenticity though in the workplace, we still over compartmentalize, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to kind of break down those silos and let people see who we are genuinely. Because again, you don't get to control how much of somebody else they share with you. And I think a lot of times in a leadership role, and you've probably been in this, like an employee shares something and you feel like it went over a line. You're like, oh, like I wouldn't have said that. But in reality, that was your line, not theirs,
Mhm.
right? So I wouldn't have told you I was going through this medical problem, or I wouldn't have told you that I was going through a divorce or all of this other stuff. But then you start evaluating, like, why do I have that line? Like, why wouldn't I tell my boss the same thing that my employee just told me? Right? Because then you realize it's trust issues and lingering work trauma. Right. So because what you learn is that when people trust you as a manager and a leader, those lines start to erode, and then you have to realize, like, man, people are bringing me a lot of stuff that they trust me with. But then you start realizing you don't trust the people who lead you with the
Yeah.
same information, right? And is that warranted, or is that residual feelings that you're bringing in from your last boss to your current boss, or just other relationships that had nothing to do with work, right? Other authority figures, parents, coaches, whoever else, that kind of I guess, dissuaded us from trusting people in authority.
Yeah, and I think it's important to, like, we as leaders are humans as well, but we also have to realize that as leaders, we are leading other humans and they all have different challenges, different their why behind what they're doing is different, whether it's supporting their family, supporting their spouse, or maybe taking care of someone that's elderly, but that could be their parents, and everyone
Yeah,
has different situations. And I think that vulnerable and authenticity is so important, not just on a personal level, but then when things are challenged, become challenging at work. Sometimes as leaders, we don't even know what we're doing.
yeah,
Sometimes you go into situations and you don't know the end result. And when you're vulnerable with your team, like, I remember one time I just had to say, is like, I don't know how we're going to get through this, but I need all your support of the team to get through this. And the team really rallied around me and the other leaders, and we got through it all together because we realized that we didn't know. We just
Yeah,
needed to lean on each other during the situation, and I think it helps build a team together. And not only that, but it helps you and your leadership because you get so much better as a leader, leading your team.
absolutely. Yeah, and again, and I think all of those things they grow our perspective, right? So the more that you learn about people, the more that people open up, the more that you open up. It's about broadening your perspective so that there are more people that you can connect to, that you can effectively lead, and you just learn different ways to kind of garner trust and and kind of build those relationships as well.
Hmm. How do you think leaders can use this book to really help them grow their both professionally and personally?
Yeah, I think the first thing is that identifying the fact that we are leaders, right? So it's one, getting people to own that responsibility that like you have influence and you are a leader. And so people who are already in leadership roles, I think like the first section of the book is almost like counseling. It's like relationship counseling, right? Because even starting off with the base principle being love, that word triggers some people associated with work,
Hmm.
right? So when you've been laid off, when you've been terminated, when you've been treated as a number, you say love in work, people are like, no. And then like
Yeah.
now you've got to evaluate, why do you feel that way? Like why do you have that kind of reaction? To because even if the company made a decision, did you do you feel like your boss didn't care about you, right? Like why does the concept of love professionally cause you so much angst, right? So I think a lot of it is introspection, which is the majority of the book, and just challenging the way that we think and posing questions that makes that makes you just think through, you know, when I am in a position of leadership, do I tend to favor people that I like? So
Yeah.
am I showing favoritism versus, because again, that's the differentiation between love and like. I love all human beings. I might like people more who have similar interests, or we've got friendships. Maybe we went to the same school, or we may have grown up in the same area, but it doesn't matter because when my leadership is based off the fact that I love everyone equally, then I'm not going to treat people that I like or give advantages or benefits to people that I like more than others, because I would be that would be untrue to my own leadership style. Right. But I have to be mindful of that. So it's really getting us to ask ourselves questions that frame and investigate the way that we think, right? And then get us to transform the way that we think before we even start worrying about delegation and accountability and everything else. Because I can teach you all of that, but if in your mind, like you don't clearly understand what it means to be a leader, then you'll just start managing tasks and doing some check the box exercises as a leader, but it hasn't fundamentally like transformed your heart in the way that you serve and lead others.
Mm, awesome. And you mentioned there's also some YouTube videos that accompany the book as well.
Yeah, so the YouTube videos predated the book. But they are on the YouTube channel, which is The Art of Leading. People can find it from my website. But there are 13 videos that accompany each of the chapters. So they're very similar. There's like the reflection questions aren't in the video. The principles in action aren't in the video. So kind of the general content of the chapter is the same as a lot of the videos, and it's a cool multimedia experience. I've been a podcast host. People can see from here, I'm like a kind of energetic, lively talker, right? Like I don't want to do like an audio book. I'm like, if people want to hear the concepts, they can hear about it in like a conversational perspective and like a kind of one-on-one podcast. So it's almost like I'm talking to an individual about the chapter is how the videos play out. It's like me sitting down with one of my mentees talking through how love is a fundamental leadership concept. So, you have visual learners, you got people who learn in different ways. So I think it works. But people who have seen the book, I've had people that have done the book. They did the videos. They've also done the leadership class online. They all took something different from it. So I think there's enough information and enough ways to engage with the content that regardless of your learning style or your preference, right? Like you can kind of connect with it and be able to hear, at least hear from me in more than one way, right? And in the way that I guess best suits people, that allows them to receive and kind of internalize that information.
Awesome. And for those that are listening or watching, if you stay after, I'll provide all that guidance to connect to you to both the book, the YouTube video, and also how you can connect with Roy. Roy, as we wrap up, one of the final questions that I wanted to talk to you about is really how the principles you talk about you talk about in the book is really evolving in the context of really we're in a different climate today with the workforce and how organizations function. There's so much that's evolving on a day to day. How do you see the principles that you talk about really evolving in the context of our changing global and organizational dynamics that we're in?
Yeah, I think it's well positioned for that, right? Because I deal with stuff globally. So like I was in Sweden back a couple of months ago. And the interesting thing is in Sweden, love is already a foundational, and care is already a
Mm,
foundational way that they talk about their employees. So like globally, a lot of other societies, right, less Western or American societies have kind of started to drift away from like employees are just a number. There's a lot of
yeah.
focus on work-life balance, right? In other countries, they have more maternity leave. They've got paternity leave. They have more vacation and PTO. Some countries have gone to 4-day work weeks, right? So there's this emphasis on people more than like product and outcomes. And I think more than anything in America, anyway, like, and we're coming up on our every 4-year fight, political climate where we all start pitting ourselves against each other, and the media and entertainment just kind of drives division in our country. That we get this hostility towards people we don't like, right? So, and I think as a leader, especially, I think it's extremely important because people are going to be more individualistic in American society. So at the end of the day, we got to learn how to separate people's individual choices, their preferences, their lifestyle, their politics, like whatever it may be, from like, who do I need to complete this job and do this work? And at the end of the day, you're a human made in the image of God, which is what I believe, that like, I still love you. I want the best for you. So let me support you in that way. So I think that's why, because it's getting to the point now where people aren't just going to leave a company because you don't agree with their politics.
Mm,
Like they will sue you because they feel like they have a right to be there because they're a human. And just because they have an opinion that differs from yours, and it kind of goes in both directions. So I think the more that we actually encounter division and deepened kind of separations in our society because of like ideology and the way that people think, like you have to lean back on love, because like inclusion isn't enough, right? And like one of the things I say in the book is that like to invite somebody to the table but not actually give them a voice is a cruel illusion of inclusion and diversity. So like if I don't like you but I hire you because I'm trying to meet a quota or I don't want to seem discriminatory, that's actually not fair to the person that you hired, because they're not going to feel accepted. They're not really going to be included. They're not going to be given a voice, right? They're just being given a seat. And so that's why I think it's important, because I mean, all studies have shown that diversity improves productivity and innovation and customer retention and employee satisfaction. So even just looking at it on that metric side, that like you want a business that has diversity of thought so that you can continue to innovate and be able to champion changes that are effective. But we have to be able as leaders to get over ourselves. We have to learn how to listen past being offended, right? And then be able to look at people's individual humanity and say, you know what? I don't agree with you on anything in your personal life, right? Or I don't agree with any of your political views. Like we are 180 degrees on everything that you would think two humans would agree on, but you're in a role, you have a skill set, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that your skills are utilized, that you are valued, that you are safe, right? And that you can be successful within any organization. And I think as leaders, especially in the secular, right, you're legally allowed to discriminate if you run a nonprofit or a religious organization. So um not there, but in work, right, in the marketplace, as people refer to it, you have to be able to work with people that you don't agree with. And so I think that's the one thing that stands out for me in my book, is that I'm teaching people how to love somebody and to lead them regardless of whether or not you like them. Because there's a lot of things right now that make us not like each other, because we live in, algorithm driven mental echo chambers that just repeat our own ideas back to us, right? So, and I think that's only going to get worse, right? I think algorithms are getting smarter. The way that we consume content is being more controlled by us. So I don't see us expanding our ideas. We're all getting deeper into smaller sets of ideas than we are gaining broader perspectives. So, as the people who have to step out and lead, we definitely have to learn how to love people, be vulnerable, and then be able to equitably and fairly like hold them accountable, develop them, and help them be successful in their careers as well.
Awesome. And for those interested in getting a copy of the book or connecting with Roy and checking out his YouTube channel as well, all those details will be provided after. And so stay tuned for that. And Roy, thank you so much for being on the podcast and really pouring into the audience here.
No, man, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on and discussing the book, man. It was a great conversation.
Thank you.